at the ULT London, England Lodge. As you know, we will be studying the lives, work, and teachings of three great individuals, three great human beings, which we have classed as three great transcendentalists. And we hope that by the end of the meeting, you will be able to see and understand why we have included them under this heading. So we begin with the usual lodge announcements. Welcome to anyone who is here for the very first time. Good to see you. Welcome to all our friends and colleagues joining us via Skype, at home and abroad, wherever you may be located. So the next our regular Sunday meetings begin. The new season of Sunday meetings begins this month, starting on the 13th of September, with some very timely and cogent articles by WQJ on the subject of the cure of diseases and how to avoid replanting them. All diseases, karmic or otherwise, begin on the mental plane or the psychic plane and are then manifested through the astral body to the physical, where they must be allowed to be expelled naturally. Well, this is a very topical subject. This will be Sunday the 13th. And also coming up this month on the 26th, which is Saturday, we have a seminar on the subject of consciousness, the new science of consciousness. This will be an afternoon seminar, so please check the details in the program, and hope that you'll be able to join us for that. What will probably be a very interesting meeting on the science or subject of consciousness, fundamental, of course, to everything. So let us begin with our devotional reading, which is this evening taken from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7. In Ontario, Canada, or Toronto, I believe, has the reading.
Hello. Yes, it is Ontario, Canada, London. That's where we have our lodge.
London.
Yeah, two Londons.
That's on the same latitude, I believe.
Yes.
As this London.
Yes. Very good. Okay. From the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7. Devotion by means of spiritual discernment. Krishna speaks. Hear, O son of Pritha, how with heart fixed on me, practicing meditation, and taking me as thy refuge, thou shalt know me completely. I will instruct thee fully in this knowledge and in its realization, which having learned, there remains nothing else to be known. Among thousands of mortals, a single one perhaps strives for perfection, and among those so striving, perhaps a single one knows me as I am. Earth, water, fire, air, and akasa, manas, buddhi, and ahankara is the eightfold division of my nature. It is inferior. Know that my superior nature is different and is the knower. By it, the universe is sustained. Learn that the whole of creation springs from this too, as from a womb. I am the cause. I am the production and the dissolution of the whole universe. There is none superior to me, O conqueror of wealth, and all things hang on me as precious gems on a string. I am the taste in water, O son of Kunti, the light in the sun and the moon, the mystic symbol Om in all the Vedas, sound in space, the masculine essence in men, the sweet smell in the earth, and the brightness in the fire. In all creatures, I am the life and the power of concentration in those whose minds are on spirit. Know me, O son of Pritha, as the eternal seed of all creatures. I am the wisdom of the wise and the strength of the strong, and I am the power of the strong, who in action are free from desire and longing. In all creatures, I am desire regulated by moral fitness. Know also that the dispositions arising from the three qualities, sattva, rajas, and tamas, are from me. They are in me, but I am not in them. The whole world, deluded by these dispositions, which are born of the three qualities, knoweth not me distinct from them, supreme, imperishable. For this my divine elusive power, acting through the natural qualities, is difficult to surmount, and only those only can surmount it who have recourse to me alone.
Thank you. And I think the operative sentence here is among the thousands who strive for true knowledge, spiritual knowledge, very few actually know Krishna or as he really is. And I would say our three great transcendentalists are three of those individuals who have reached to that level. So, if you have a question on the reading, can we save it for the end? Because I'd like to go straight into our article from this evening, and we shall spend roughly 40 minutes on each person, and we'll save the questions and comments for after we finished the reading each of the biographies. So we need a volunteer to start us off with Rumi, either here or on Skype. Any volunteers? Yes? Okay. We have one here.
The Sufis.
Could you speak up, please, so the...
Yeah, okay. Jalaluddin Rumi. The Sufis are...
Could you give the dates? The dates.
1207 to 1273. The Sufis are ancient spiritual Freemasonry whose origins have never been traced or dated. They are not a Muslim sect, are at home in all religions, and believe Sufism to be the secret teaching within all religions. The name Sufi is actually a nickname like the Quakers. They call themselves the Friends, or the people like us. Even the Prophet Muhammad was said to have described those who ignored their teachings as heedless. The perfected Sufi is great, exalted, he is sublime. Through love, work, and harmony, he has attained to the highest degree of mastership. All secrets are open to him, and his whole being is imbued with magical effulgence. He is the guide and traveller on the way of infinite beauty, love, attainment, power, fulfillment, the guardian of the most ancient wisdom, the trailblazer to the highest secrets, the beloved friend whose very being elevates us, bringing new meaning to the spirit of humanity.
Could you read a bit more slowly?
This is the one portrayal of the Sufi by a contemporary writer who is not himself a Sufi, though he has lived among the followers of the way of love. from the Sufis by Idris Shah. He is enlightened whose speech and behavior accord, who repudiates the ordinary connections of the world, Dahun, the Egyptian quoted in the Sufis. Maulana, literally our master, Jalaluddin Rumi, who founded the order of whirling dervishes, vowed out in his career the Eastern saying, giants come forth from Afghanistan and influence the world. He was born in Bactria of a noble family at the beginning of the 13th century. He lived and taught in Iconium, Rome, in Asia Minor, before the beginning of the Ottoman Empire, whose throne he is said to have refused. His works are written in Persian and so esteemed by the Persians for their poetic, literary and mystical content. They are called the Quran of the Pahlavi tongue, and this in spite of their being opposed to the national cult of the Persians, the Shia faith, criticizing its exclusivism. Among the Arabs, the Pakistani and the Indian Muslims, Rumi is considered to be one of the first rank of mystical masters. Yet he states that the teachings of the Quran are allegorical and that it has 7 different meanings. The extent of Rumi's influence can hardly be calculated. Even the critical Dr. Johnson says of Rumi, he makes plain to the pilgrim the secrets of the way of unity and unveils the mysteries of the path of eternal truth. His work was well enough known within less than 100 years of his death in 1273 for Chaucer to use references to it in some of his works, together with material from the teachings of Rumi's spiritual precursor, Attar the Chemist, 1150 to 1230. Example is in his Canterbury Tales, an allegory of inner development. The phrase by Rumi, used by the whirling dervishes, beat the heart, Sufi exercises, and the neglectful faculties, and behave correctly. This is the slogan which introduces the beating of the heart, movements encouraged by the motions and the concentrations of the Maghribi dervishes. Rumi's influence, both in ideas and textually, is considerable in the West, since most of his work has been translated into Western languages in more recent years. His impact has become greater, although surely the greatest mystical poet in the history of mankind, the poetry itself in which so much of his teaching is couched, can really only be appreciated in the original Persian. The teachings, however, are not so elusive, providing that the way of putting esoteric truths is understood. There are 3 documents by means of which Rumi's work can be studied by the outside world. The Masnavi-i Spiritual Couplets is Johann's masterwork, 6 books of poetry and imagery of such power in the original that its recitation produces a strangely complex exaltation of the hearer's consciousness. It was 43 years in the writing. It cannot exactly be criticized as poetry because of the special intricacy of ideas, form and presentation. In fact, Rumi created a special art form for the express purpose of conveying meanings which he himself concedes of no actual parallel in ordinary human experience. And to the Sufi, not to anyone else, this book speaks from a different dimension, yet a dimension which is in a way within his deepest self. The message which Rumi, as with all Sufi masters, is arranged partially in response to the environment in which he was working. He instituted dances and whirling movements among his disciples. It is related because of the phlegmatic temperament of the people among whom he was cast. In his teachings, Rumi used explanation and mental drill, thought and meditation, work and play, action and inaction. The body-mind movements of the whirling dervishes, coupled with the reed pipe music, to which they were performed is the product of a special method designed to bring the seeker into affinity with the mystical current in order to be transformed by it. Everything which the unregenerate man understands has a use and meaning within the special context of Sufism, which may be invisible until it is experienced. Prayer, says Rumi, has a form, a sound, and a physical reality. Everything which has a word has a physical equivalent, and every thought has an action. In order to appreciate the Sufi way, the seeker must realize that he is largely a bundle of what is nowadays called conditionings, fixed ideas and prejudices, automatic responses sometimes, which have occurred through the training of others. Man is not as free as he thinks he is. The first step for the individual is to get away from the thinking that he understands and really understands. Man has been taught that he can understand everything by the same process, the process of logic. This teaching has undermined him. That quote from the Sufis by Idris Shah.
Thank you. And of course, Rumi is famous for his poetry, his couplets, his aphorisms, of which there are many, which cover the whole range of human aspirations. And they are the principal means through which he taught. His family settled in Konya, which is in modern-day Turkey, but at that time, the 13th century, was still part of the Byzantine Empire, but under the Turks, who were invading the territory, and it's still today the center of the whirling dervishes. So we're going to have a look at some of his couplets, of his aphorisms on the screen, and then we'll comment and discuss them afterwards. Could we have a volunteer on Skype, a Skype listener, to read the first part of the text?
Yes, I can read.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Rumi. The meditations of Rumi include some remarkable ideas designed to bring the seeker into an understanding of the fact that he is temporarily out of contact with complete reality. Even though ordinary life seems to be the totality of life itself, what we see, feel, and experience in ordinary unfulfilled life, according to Sufi thinking, is only a part of a great whole. There are dimensions which we can only reach through effort, like the submerged portion of the iceberg. They are there, though unperceived under ordinary conditions. Also, like the iceberg, they are far greater than could be suspected from superficial studies.
Thank you. And of course, all the great teachers taught in parables, using allegories and the principles of comparison and analogy, and using everyday language or metaphors and so on to stimulate or to awaken new thought or new ways of thinking in their listeners, in those they sought to teach. So could you read the first four of Rumi's statements, please?
Yes. You belong to the world of dimensions, but you come from non-dimensions. Close the first shop, open the second. The book of the Sufis is not the darkness of letters. It is the witness of a pure heart.
Whiteness.
Sorry. Whiteness. of a pure heart. Enlightenment must come little by little, otherwise it would overwhelm you. If a man were entirely wise and had no ignorance, he would be destroyed by it. Therefore, ignorance is laudable because it means continued existence. Ignorance is the collaborator of wisdom, in this sense of alteration, as night and day complement one another.
Thank you. So, do you have any comment or question on any of these statements? What particularly strikes you or impresses you about them?
I think it's interesting with the sort of relational aspect here, with that everything is sort of sometimes defined by what it's not as well as what it is, and especially when he's saying this about ignorance and wisdom, that the idea is if the question is answered, then there's no need for the question unless I can't sort of continue.
Yes.
If you were to answer the questions, then no one would have, just as like as an analogy. If you reach the answer,
the very fact that you need to ask a question implies that you
need to find the answer.
that you are ignorant of something.
But then if you had answered it completely, then you wouldn't have the need to ask the questions.
Yes,
so there
but
always needs to remain something, which I think he was saying here, had no ignorance, he would be destroyed by it. The thing would end. It applies an end if it's answered completely. But if there's still room for learning, then it keeps the questions, and from those maybe grow other things. I don't know, I'm just surmising from finding.
that's right. Actually, we speak about lifelong learning, and that the journey goes on, life after life. We never reach, even the greatest ones still have more to learn on a higher level. What about this one about the dimensions? What could we say about that? Do you think it's a correct appraisal of the human state of mind, the general state of mind? Yes?
If we refer to the board over there, the list of the 7 principles that Theosophy teaches of the human being, the highermost part of us, Atman, called the higher self, is pure, eternal, universal spirit, which could be said to be non-dimension. It's infinite, absolute. And the part of us we're most familiar with, that we experience most directly in everyday life, are the lower principles. So I think...
Could that be what he calls the world of dimension?
Yes, that's what I was...
The measurable world, or the visible plane?
So it seems Rumi's statement is another way of saying that personal self has to elevate its consciousness back to its source, which is within itself.
That's right, because we are actually multi-dimensional beings, or we exist on several planes simultaneously, but we are not fully conscious on all of them, unlike the adepts are. We are conscious, or even only partly conscious, on the lower planes, the lower quaternary, we call them. Now, a big part of Rumi's teachings is the power of the heart. That the heart is really the center of spiritual knowledge, of wisdom. That's where we must seek, not in the externals or exoteric dogma of teachings of various religions. Everything is located within your own heart, and that's where you must look for it. Look for the wisdom you seek, or the answers you seek as Krishna speaks of the Lord Ishvara seated in the heart of every man, who with devotion fixed on him over time, finds spiritual knowledge springing up spontaneously. So we'll continue with the rest of the quotes. So we need another volunteer to continue reading. Please come forward and help us out. Someone?
I can read if you wish.
Yes? Okay.
If a man were entirely wise and had no
No,
ignorance.
we've read that one.
Okay, sorry. While the inner lamp of jewels is still alight, hasten to trim its wick and provide it with oil. Before garden, wine or grape were in the world, our soul was drunken with immortal wine. Wool, through the presence of man of knowledge, becomes a carpet. Earth becomes a palace. The presence of a spiritual man creates a similar transformation. Those who do not understand a thing claim that it is useless. The hand and the instrument are as flint and steel. Strike flint with earth, will a spark be made?
Thank you. So, what strikes you about any one or more of these statements? What makes an impression on you? Rumi has a certain style of expression, don't you think, which is designed to make you think, or think more deeply about yourself and reality.
He speaks in a way which the common man can understand, but the depth of his words brings wisdom to those who have the ability to perceive the inner meaning.
Indeed.
What I like about it is that it gives us the opportunity to accept the conditions that we live in without fighting so hard against them, but to see their wisdom and to work with that rather than constantly struggling against the conditions, that to work in harmony with the conditions. That's one thing that comes from this.
Yes, not to resist or struggle against really what is your situation or your karma in effect, which is really what you need for your learning process. But I think it also implies the need to look beyond the everyday, beyond the physical world, to certainly the universal or the aspect, the bigger picture. I mean, we could call it, expansion of consciousness, not to be limited by externals or even internals of emotions and thoughts, but to be open to the wisdom that is inherent in all of us. As it said, we once lived as immortals, and we were conscious of immortality and of that higher reality. He uses, wine and drunken, these metaphors which are related to intoxication, but this is obviously the highest kind of intoxication. Okay, let's read on. Another volunteer? Those who do not understand, no, concentrate on spirituality.
I can read if you like.
Yes, definitely.
Concentrate on spirituality as you will. It will shun you if you are unworthy about it. Boast of it. comment upon it, it will decline to benefit you. It will run away. But if it sees your concentration, it may come to your hand like a trained bird. Like the peacock, it will not sit in an unworthy place. Take the pearl, not the shell. You will not find a pearl in every shell. A mountain is many times larger than a ruby. The satiated man and the hungry one do not see the same thing when they look upon a loaf of bread. Woman is not a mere plaything, but a ray of deity. Mankind has an unfulfillment, a desire, and he struggles to fulfill it through all kinds of enterprises and ambitions. But it is only in love that he can find fulfillment.
Thank you. And Rumi also teaches that while love is extremely important, enlightenment must go hand in hand with love. To be balanced, to have the balanced view of life and of oneself. Heart and mind must work together. The reason and intuition must go together because they are both faculties in us and they need each other, or they need to work with each other. So any comment, again, what impressed you about any of these, or what ideas do you take from them?
I want to mention about the part where it says, woman is not a mere plaything, but a ray of deity.
Yes.
From my perspective, it says woman like if it was an object, but if you put man in there, could it be implied in the same way? Could it be interpreted by the same way?
I don't think so, because the whole point of this statement was, particularly in a patriarchal society where women were considered the chattels or the belongings even of the husbands of men, they forgotten the true value of not the femininity but of woman. That is actually, woman is supposed to be closer to the deity in the sense that she has the power to create from her own body, and this should afford great respect, or greater respect. I mean, it's not quite feminism, it's more toward the idea of equality of the sexes, or trying to elevate the view of womanhood, which in most cultures have been very low for a long time, actually. Yes.
There's also a statement that was written by the Master K.H., one of the Mahatmas behind the Theosophical movement. He said, "On the elevation of woman, the world's redemption and salvation hinge." So
indeed, so that implies how important woman is. I mean, not only are men and women equal partners in creation, and men should view it as such, but it means we need to work together. The two sexes need to work together for the advancement of humanity and evolution, in fact, because they are like two sides of the same coin. They need each other. I mean, the ideal of marriage was meant to unite the two sexes in almost one being, so to speak, the true human being. All right. So, and any final comment or question, either on Rumi's life or teachings? And of course, what struck me, Rumi used poetry, couplets, little stories, analogy, parables, in a way similar to the writings of Lao Tse, and also these enigmatic statements, using everyday language, metaphors, and also the Zen Buddhist poetry, which is also designed to pry open your normal level of consciousness, your normal perceptions, and make you perceive a deeper reality. So, anyone have a comment or question? Yes.
Do you think that Nietzsche might have been influenced by Rumi with the Lust of Zarathustra and the idea of poetry in how do you science, gay science? He dictates that poetic form as like the highest form of understanding and communication, rather than just saying it how it is, this idea. But I think someone else touched on this as well, like the simplicity but yet the complexity. And again, I think also there was a quote from Rumi that he mentioned again about...
Well, you've touched on the quote of Zoroastrianism, which is a very ancient religion, actually predates not only Christianity, but Judaism and Islam. And it is full of wisdom as well. Could call it a wisdom religion or tradition. And Sufism itself is said to go back, actually, at least 2000 BC. It's said to be, or all of the world's religions are said to be individual rays of Sufism. So, Sufism, in a way, we could say, is the essence of all religions, or the inner teaching, the esoteric. And we often say about theosophy, the same thing about theosophy. Theosophy is the synthesis of all the religions, but also philosophy and science. And so we need to go back to the roots of these traditions in order to gain the essential truth. And of course, every religion begins in a pure form with its originators, its reformers and teachers, given out in a pure form, like the parables of Jesus and so on. But as we see over time, they become, the religions become dogmatized and stigmatized and turned into something else, or they go in a different direction which they were never meant to. Yes?
When you say all religions are raised from Sufism, presumably you mean Sufism in the broad, abstract sense of wisdom, rather than what most people think of as Sufi Islam. Because, for example, the Sufi form of Islam, on the whole, for example, it either doesn't mention or it denies reincarnation, but that's one of the main principles of ancient wisdom that Theosophy presents. So if we look at Sufism as we find it today, this a sect of Islam, it isn't really the universal, broad, complete, vast system that transcends all religions.
But I think actually Idris Shah himself said that Sufism is not a sect of Islam because it predates Islam.
Yeah.
It's actually the form we know it in, obviously through the Rumi and his predecessors, comes through that tradition or that part of the world which became Islamicized. But Sufism is, I would compare it to the yoga tradition in India, to the Gnosticism also in the Western tradition. which has had many sort of expressions or over the centuries. But Sufism basically teaches that you can only experience deity through your own experience. It must be something you experience for yourself, not something you believe because your church or your religion has taught you that you should believe in this or that. Yes?
Is that because you are it as well? Like you are the thing you experience, so you are God in that, like in that place. Like the idea of getting back to that part of yourself where God is within you, so you are God. Everyone is God. Is that because I did read that somewhere in a book on Sufism? Is that am I right in that? In thinking that that's one of the central principles.
That's right. I mean, whether you believe in God or you're an atheist, it's not the point, because that's more of an opinion, where knowledge or wisdom goes beyond opinion or even a belief, blind belief, blind following beliefs without actually knowing. Knowing or true knowledge comes with self-knowledge, of course, but this is the inner way. And actually, as in yoga, yoga is defined as union with the divine, but it's a process which takes place within you over time, gradually. And another quote from this book is that about enlightenment must be a gradual process, because if you were to have it all at once, it would overwhelm you, it would destroy you. And the analogy is drawn with the heat of a furnace, where they make pottery. The heat is too much. It would overwhelm you or even destroy you if you came too near it. But the flame of a small lamp would be much more useful for you. The heat from a small lamp could actually warm you or alight a room for you. So again, did someone else have their hand up?
Having seen the whirling dervishes many years ago, I understood at the time from them that their methodology, their practice is controlled by very strict rules and canons. Is it possible that they, in a sense, have fallen into being a particular sect in some respects?
Well, they're described as a sect, but I suppose you have to examine what their teachings and beliefs are. I mean, they believe that through the whirling, but also this practice of beating the heart. And again, the heart, you see, for them is extremely important. It is seen as a means of self-discipline, but also of creating kind of ecstatic state where you draw nearer to the spirit. It's and also it was said earlier, the repetition of the couplets or the poetry or the statements have their own power as well. They generate, like mantras in a way, they generate a certain vibration or attract certain thoughts through the law of affinity. So again, it all depends on the motive really and how it's pursued. I've seen them perform at the South Bank 10, 15 years ago, and it was quite an experience just to watch them. Almost lifted you up into the ether. All right, friends, so we're going to move on to our second great figure, the adept, Le Comte de Saint-Germain. Most of you Theosophists will be familiar with this name and this personality. Of course, he was a great polymath, and one of his abilities was composition. He composed, as we shall hear in a moment, some very competent and well-composed music, classical music in the Baroque style of the mid-18th century. So we're going to listen to the first track of an album from YouTube, and it will last for 6 minutes.
Listen to that now.
Yes, please.
So just in case, well, we're going to share screen and sound for those on Skype. Just in case it doesn't come out well and you can't hear it, here's the link if you want to click on it yourself.
Thank you. And you can listen to the rest of that album at home at your leisure, if you like that style of music. So let's go to the article, and we need a volunteer to start reading.
I can read if you wish.
Yes.
The Comte de Saint Germain, dates unknown. Who was Saint Germain? The following was published under the title Count de Saint Germain in the September 1963 issue of the Theosophical Movement magazine, produced by the United Lodge of Theosophists in India. Since Tsongkhapa, the Tibetan adept and world reformer, inaugurated in the 14th century his movement for the spiritual enlightenment of humanity, including the West, members of the adept fraternity have attempted to give out, century by century, a greater or less amount of occult knowledge to a world increasingly deluded by materialism. Mesmer and other representatives of the Great Lodge functioned in the 18th century under the guiding influence of the Count de Saint Germain, whom H.P. Blavatsky calls the greatest Oriental adept Europe has seen during the last centuries. Theosophical Glossary, pages 308-309. But Europe had neither the mental understanding nor the moral perception to evaluate correctly and derive full benefit from the labours of great ones whose aim was sole service of fellow beings gone astray and who had no axe of their own to grind. Madame Blavatsky, in an article on the Count de Saint Germain in the Theosophist, May 1881, called for the vindication of his memory and wrote, "The treatment this great man, this pupil of Indian and Egyptian hierophants, this proficient and secret wisdom of the East, has had from Western writers is a stigma upon human nature. And so has the stupid world behaved towards every other person who, like Saint Germain, has revisited it after long seclusion, devoted to study, with his stores of accumulated esoteric wisdom, in the hope of bettering it and making it wiser and happier." The background of the Count de Saint Germain and his true mission in life are unsolved mysteries for those who are not familiar with the modus operandi of adepts, who know what they do and silently do what they can for the true welfare of mankind. They give no thought to painful consequences accruing to themselves, owing to the opposition of the men in power who, for serving their own ends and ambitions, dominate the people's minds, to adjust and enfranchise, which is the philanthropic work of the representatives of the Great Lodge. As befitted one of his kind, Saint Germain evaded inquisitive inquiries about his age, his parentage, and early life, as he travelled from country to country, furtherance of his benevolent objective. H.P. wrote of him, "Count Saint Germain is, until this very time, a living mystery. Countless authorities we have in literature, as well as in oral tradition, which sometimes is the more trustworthy. About this wonderful Count having been met and recognized in different centuries is no myth." A Modern Phanarian, page 44. The standard people He came under his magnetic influence, persisted in asking who he was, that, without visible sources of income, bedecked himself with superb diamonds and gave away precious stones and jewelry as presents to his friend with as great nonchalance as that with which another would distribute trifles. He enjoyed the confidence and admiration of the cleverest statesmen and nobles of Europe for long years. However ignorant of the true position and purpose, some jealous statesmen and ministers whom he met in the course of his unpaid missions for peace to various European courts referred to him in their correspondence, contempt, or dealt harshly with him as a spy or an impostor. In the salons which he visited, he would entertain the company with weird stories of the hidden world, with himself as a witness and an actor therein, but would never break bread with anyone. His rare intellectual endowments, brilliant conversation, and mysterious modes of life astounded and dazzled the public mind.
Thank you. Let's jump to page 4 to the paragraph beginning from the few facts available about his life. Do you have another volunteer? Yes?
From the few facts available about this great life, we can say that the Count was not only an adept in the occult arts, but was also the master of many physical arts and sciences. He is claimed to have known about trains and steamboats decades before these inventions came into use. Among the accomplishments ascribed to him may be mentioned the dyeing and preparation of skins, carried to a perfection which surpassed all the Moroccos in the world. The dyeing of silks, woolens, and wood in the most brilliant colours, etc. He played on every instrument and was said to have rivaled Paganini on the violin. He was also a painter of rare ability. He had a prodigious memory, and his enormous erudition included a thorough knowledge of nearly all the European and many Oriental languages, such as Sanskrit, Chinese, and Arabic. He had travelled almost the whole world over. He is said to have given the finishing touches to the training of Mesmer, who rediscovered animal magnetism for the cure of diseases. Cagliostro, too, worked for a time under his direction. He is reported also to have collaborated with Saint Martin in his Masonic and Theosophical work. It is said that all four of these adepts were together at the Paris Convention of Freemasons in 1785. There are references in the Theosophical Glossary to Saint-Germain's remarkable knowledge of early Masonry, and a Master of Wisdom has referred to the work he did for Rosicrucianism, while Christian Rosenkreutz taught orally. Saint-Germain recorded the good doctrines in figures. Madame Blavatsky mentions one of his ciphered Rosicrucian manuscripts in Isis Unveiled, and quotes at length from another in The Secret Doctrine. He could transmute iron into gold while one stood and watched. The fusing of small diamonds into large ones and removing flaws from diamonds was his speciality. But why, one may ask, did he, an adept, decorate himself with jewellery and distribute gems all around? Can we learn something from this? Can we not take diamonds to symbolize the acme of earthly possessions, toiling for which we of the world exhaust ourselves? Even if we had diamonds in plenty, they would not avail us, because material wealth is for superficial decoration and glorifying the body only, which will perish. Why not then work for a diamond soul, the deserving of which title is the final aim for which the universe exists, and which is the task that claims all our skill and sacrifice, our toil and travail for eternal peace and happiness.
Thank you. We'll stop there. And we could say Le Comte de Saint-Germain had quite a long career. He was on the scene basically the whole of the second half of the 18th century, mostly in France, where he had a special mission to help build up the economy of that country, but also to mitigate or prevent the excesses of the French Revolution, or at least to attempt to prevent them. But in that particular regard, he was frustrated by, as it said, the men in power. He wasn't able to save the monarchy. Of course, what is remarkable about Saint-Germain is that he was an adept who worked virtually publicly. He worked openly in the society of the day. He moved in aristocratic circles, in the court circles. He also had a very practical side to him, as we see. He was a chemist or an alchemist. A lot of his inventions had practical benefits for the industries of those days, dyeing, as was mentioned. At the same time, he served under two kings as an ambassador to various other countries. So all the time working through the society of the day, and also with his fellow Masons, to improve or uplift the European culture at the time. And he, as you said, he worked with Mesmer, Saint Martin, and Cagliostro. And yes, it was said he never ate. Even at banquets, he never partook of the food available. He had his own drink, which was a special herbal tea, apparently. And it said occasionally he was observed to eat only a bowl of oatmeal. But the remarkable thing is he remained youthful through this whole period. He never aged, and this has been testified by various letters and quotes in the biographies of the people he knew, particularly the ladies of the court that he knew quite well. So, any comment or suggestion? Oh, question?
Yeah. In the previous meeting that we had here 10 days or so ago, we made reference to an article. It's in the book 5 Years of Theosophy that we sell here and on the Lodge website. An article titled The Elixir of Life. And it's a long article, but goes into as much detail as was permitted by the masters in terms of making public and explaining some of the processes by which an initiate or adept can stay in the same physical body for centuries without apparently aging. And reading that about Saint Germain, it may at first sound fantastical, far-fetched, impossible, but the article shows that there's actually a scientific, an occultly scientific facet to this. It's not
That's right.
superstitious magic.
But it's not given out to everyone willy-nilly, obviously. And it's also said that after his long period of working in the West, in Europe, he had to retire to the Himalayas to regenerate himself. Of course, for his next phase of work in the following century. Okay, so please read the rest of that his biography at your leisure, and we'll move on. Move on to Albert Einstein. So we're traveling through time, as you've noticed. We are all time travelers this evening. So we need another volunteer to read this section. Please don't be shy.
If you wish, I can read.
Okay, could we...
Maybe someone else.
We have 18 people joining us, so surely there must be someone else among...
Can you hear me?
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Albert Einstein. 1879-1955. Albert Einstein was a German-born theoretical physicist who developed the theory of relativity alongside quantum mechanics, one of the two pillars of modern physics. His work is also known for its influence on the philosophy of science and his contribution to numerous other discoveries and inventions. He is best known to the general public for his mass energy equivalence formula E=mc², which has been dubbed the world's most famous equation. In 1917, he applied the general theory of relativity to model the structure of the universe. He received the 1921 Nobel Prize in Physics for his service to theoretical physics, especially for his discovery of the law of the photoelectric effect, a pivotal step in the development of quantum theory. Published more than 300 scientific papers and more than 150 non-scientific works. His intellectual achievements and originality have made the name Einstein synonymous with genius. A contemporary colleague of his, comparing him to the contemporaries, wrote that Einstein's understanding was deeper than most, and his mind was more penetrating and more original. In later life, he developed the more philosophical and moralistic aspects of his character. His pithy, everyday grassroots philosophy on a range of subjects reflects a great humanity and deep practical wisdom. He is reputed by some to have kept a copy of the secret doctrine on his desk while working. Albert Einstein wrote these wise words about ancient and recent thought. Somebody who reads only newspapers and at best books of contemporary authors looks to me like an extremely nearsighted person who scorns eyeglasses. He is completely dependent on the prejudices and fashions of his times since he never gets to see or hear anything else. And what a person thinks on his own without being stimulated by the thoughts or experiences of other people is, even in the best case, rather paltry and monotonous. Einstein added, there are only a few enlightened people with a lucid mind and style, and with good taste within a century. What has been preserved of their work belongs among the most precious possessions of mankind. We owe it to a few writers of antiquity that the people in the Middle Ages could slowly extricate themselves from the superstitions and ignorance that had darkened life for more than a half a millennium. He concluded, nothing is more needed than to overcome the modernist snobbishness. Source, Ideas and Opinions, Albert Einstein.
Yeah, you can leave.
Okay. Carry on with the next paragraph.
Continue, yes.
The true value of a human being is determined primarily by the measure of the sense in which he has attained liberation from the self. I am absolutely convinced that no wealth in the world can help humanity forward, even in the hands of the most devoted worker in this cause. The example of great and pure individuals is the only thing that can lead us to noble thoughts and deeds. Money only appeals to selfishness and irresistibly invites abuse. Can anyone imagine Moses, Jesus, or Gandhi armed with money bags? Einstein dedicated the last part of his life to the ideal of a weapon-free, universal brotherhood among nations. He was intensely active in working for the establishment of a planetary democracy and felt profound admiration for Mahatma Gandhi, writing on the Indian activist and thinker, a leader of his people, unsupported by any outward authority, a politician whose success rests not upon craft nor the mastery of technical devices, but simply on the convincing power of his personality, a victorious fighter who has always scorned the use of force, a man of wisdom and humility, armed with resolve and inflexible consistency, who has devoted all his strength to the uplifting of his people and the betterment of their loves, a man who has confronted the brutality of Europe with the dignity of the simple human being, and thus at all times risen superior. Generations to come, maybe, will scarce believe such a one as this, ever in flesh and blood, walked upon this earth. Einstein,
Hang on. Let's skip that first paragraph. If we have time, we'll go back to it. Just continue from Sylvia Cranston's biography.
okay. Sylvia Cranston's biography of HPB, HPB, The Extraordinary Life and Influence of Helena Blavatsky, describes on anecdotal evidence Einstein's niece as visiting the Theosophical Society after his death to donate his copy of The Secret Doctrine, which she apparently said was a book frequently studied. It has transpired, however, that he did not have a niece, and that the Theosophical Society denies such events as having happened. While several different theosophical sources have provided anecdotal evidence of Einstein reportedly admiring the secret doctrine, the claims so far remain unverified and unverifiable. It may be true, but it equally may not be. On Einstein's death, D.T. Wadia of the United Lodge of Theosophists wrote a short obituary article about him in the Aryan Path magazine, quoting some of Einstein's statements. that only feeble souls pursue spiritual or mystical ideas and believe there is purpose that survives death. Einstein wrote that he would never wish to believe in such a concept. To inquire after the meaning or object of one's own existence, or that of all creatures, has always seemed to me absurd from an objective point of view, wrote Einstein. Wadhya sums up, however, he had freed himself from the tyranny of the lower personal self. He modeled and synthesized the teaching of Schopenhauer that a man can do what he wants, but not what he but not want what he wants. On the positive side, his faith in the brotherhood of all men was deep and wide. 100 times every day, I remind myself that the inner and outer life are based on the labors of other men, living and dead, that I must exert myself in order to give in the same measure as I have received and am still receiving. I am strongly drawn to a frugal life and am often oppressively aware that I am engrossing an undue amount of the labor of my fellow men. Let us salute the large-hearted man who suffers in his feelings, but spread the joy of knowledge all around.
Thank you. And of course, it can't be denied that Einstein was a great humanitarian, cared deeply for the human condition, and for trying to educate and elevate society. He is famous for many quotes and aphorisms on a whole range of subjects. We have a short section here, Einstein on education. We've got time to read 4 or 5 of these. Could we have a volunteer to read these quotes from the top of page 7? Someone who hasn't read yet. Someone who hasn't read yet, if possible.
Okay, I'm prepared to read.
Good. Thank you.
Sorry.
Have you got the place?
Yes. Einstein and education, number 1.
Yes, please. Yes.
Yes. The wit was not wrong to define education in this way. Education is that which remains if one has forgotten everything he learned in school, ideas and opinions. I have no special talent. I'm only passionately curious. Einstein, His Life and
Just need
Universe.
to read the source, just the quote, please.
Okay. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited. Imagination encircles the world. It is supreme art of the teacher to awaken joy and creative expression and knowledge. The development of general ability for independent thinking and judgment should always be placed foremost, not the acquisition of special knowledge. To sense that behind everything that can be experienced, there is something.
No, you missed one. In every true searcher of nature. Number 6.
Oh, number 6, sorry. In every true searcher of nature, there is a kind of religious reverence. To sense that behind anything that can be experienced, there is something that our minds cannot grasp, whose beauty and sublimity reaches us only indirectly. this is religiousness. In the sense, and in the sense only, I'm devotedly religious man.
Thank you. And here it's only a taster, really, of his style of writing and commentary. And as we see, he was a teacher, I mean a professor. He worked at Princeton University in California for many years. And a lot of his ideas quite radical, even radical, reformatory. He wanted to reform the whole system, starting with education. He prized the importance of the individual thinking, of the
Independent.
originality of individual thought and expression, but always working for the community, working not separate or for its own sake, but working with the community. The individual needs the community, but the community also requires great individuals with great minds, as like these great transcendentalists who, through their original and creative thought, can uplift everybody. Yes.
I notice we have just under 5 minutes left, and we haven't heard very much from those on Skype this meeting in terms of questions or comments, either in the chat box or spoken. So I thought,
okay, so shall we take a selection of those?
Well, we don't really have any. That's what I'm saying. So maybe we should encourage those on Skype.
Okay. Do we have a question or comment about the life of Einstein
Or Saint-Germain?
or Saint-Germain?
Now's the time to speak or type it.
I have a question.
Yes.
Regarding the 4 adepts who met together in Paris, the Masonic meeting.
Yes.
What would you say was their primary aim regarding helping to further brotherhood in society at that time?
That's a very good question. This was quite a famous meeting, a convention, in fact, in Paris. In the years before the revolution, it said actually the original revolutionaries in France were influenced by the Masons or by certain adepts. Certainly, a lot of the ideas or idealism which was expressed at the time of the revolution is quite, for that time, was quite radical and advanced. Not least, of course, the motto "Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité," which is the rights of man became part of the consciousness, and the old way, the old repression of the lower classes had to be done away with, and the rise of republicanism as a better way of managing a state or of a state to live was put into practice. Of course, it went awry because human beings are not perfect, and a lot of the idealism was distorted. But the ideas remain, and I think this was the true aim of the. Of course, the Masons moved in the upper echelons of society, the ruling classes, so to speak, and were highly influential both at court and in Europe, in the European wide circles generally. So they had a lot of influence. And of course, the 18th century is called the Age of Enlightenment. Of course, not absolute enlightenment, but to a certain degree, socially and philosophically and in the arts, it was quite a shining period. So, any other points or questions? I think we have time for one more.
There's one just come through in the chat box. I think this is referring to Einstein, it doesn't say exactly. I was wondering why he was a transcendentalist. Yes, I was wondering why Einstein was a transcendentalist if he didn't think there was life after death. I understand he did believe in the universe, but not in a divine entity or...
Yes, so that's a very good question. Why has he been included under the title of a great transcendentalist? Primarily because of his radical and far-reaching science or scientific discoveries, of course, which have changed the world, our perception of the universe, which could be described as transcendental in a way. The law of his laws of physics, of quantum theory, and so on. But also because of his great humanitarianism. I would definitely call him a great philanthropist. He had a great empathy for humanity, suffering humanity, and he did a lot of humanitarian work in his life, which we haven't touched on, but you can find out about. And he basically, his ideas, many of his ideas, particularly the more philosophical ones, in general, are very uplifting and elevating. Even just his quotes on religion, on education alone. If you look at them, they if they were implemented generally, it would really change humanity, change our society anyway. So I think we've come to the end of our time. So thank you, friends, for all your time and attention, and we hope you gain some new insights tonight and new understanding. Of course, there is a lot more material on all these three figures, which you can research in your own time. Remind you of our next meeting here at the London ULT Lodge is on the Sunday, September the 13th at 7 p.m. British summertime. And it will be 2 articles by WQJ, The Cure of Diseases and How to Avoid Replanting Them. A very topical subject, to say the least. So I hope you can join us then. And the next Wednesday meeting will be on the 16th of September. The Ideal Society, a theosophical perspective, which we've touched on actually in our meeting this evening. So good night all, and take care.
Thank you.